Hello, beautiful moms and entrepreneurs. My name is Charisse Walker, and I'm your host of the Unbreakable Mompreneurs podcast. This is a place where we come together to learn, grow, and inspire. So sit back, relax, and let's get started. Hello, Unbreakable Mompreneurs. I am so excited to be here again with another episode. And today I'm here with Jewel Hohman, and I love her story. And I actually totally relate to her story, and I'm sure many of you can as well. So I'm actually just going to let her introduce herself, and then we'll get started.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I know I was telling you this before we jumped on, but I'm just so inspired by you and your story, and I'm just so excited to talk with you. And you nailed my name, Jewel Hohman. So that's already super impressive. And I am a social confidence and friendship coach. So right now, we're currently looking to expand. I'm super excited. But right now I work with people one-on-one and I help people enjoy being themselves in social settings because truthfully, that is like the number one thing I've noticed when loneliness is at an all-time high. I'm also a friendship coach as well. But loneliness being at an all-time high, a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, especially moms and entrepreneurs, let alone mompreneurs, am I right? But we're like, oh, how do I have the time? Especially when we think about going and meeting people and making friends, then that social confidence comes into play because it's like, do I really want to go and put the effort in and overthink everything I said and did afterwards? So that is really what I am on a mission to help people do, is to help make socializing truly more enjoyable so we can create those deep bonds and enjoy being ourselves.
And I think that that's fantastic because, you talked about trauma and healing from the trauma so that you can actually be able to do that. And it's interesting because I've been one of those people, not so much anymore, but one of those people where I'd prefer to kind of be with my husband, be with my kids, because I was working so much. And so when I was home, I'm like, I'm not going to go hang out with friends because I haven't seen my kids enough anyway. And so I've kind of got used to that over the years. I was talking with someone. I lead this group coaching program every morning, and somebody was like, "Oh yeah, I just found some clients because I went on this app and young moms with kids, and so we meet at this park. Like they don't know each other; they just meet each other on this app, and then they get together." And I'm like, that is so weird. I'm like, that is so genius that first of all, she feels comfortable enough to be able to do that. And then you make new friends. And she goes, yeah, I've been friends with this lady that we met like that, like 6 years ago. And so some people can really they're totally outgoing and they have to have 20 friends. You see, I have a neighbor of mine, her daughter had like 22 bridesmaids. Okay. I'm like, that's
Wow.
and then there's others where they have two. So, how do you, if you're somebody who doesn't feel very comfortable in their skin, how do you recommend that they get started getting out of that?
Well, there's a lot of different reasons why somebody could be uncomfortable. This advice is just going to be like really plain, but honestly, to your listener, right? Being a mom, being an entrepreneur, they're smart women. Like I encourage them to like think about it for themselves. But one thing that I have noticed that has been really helpful for people is to really start accepting themselves and appreciating themselves as they are. And that sounds really cheesy, but research and like evidence-based self-help practices really back that. When we can look at ourselves, appreciate ourselves, it's so much easier than to put ourselves, quote unquote, do the effort and put ourselves out there to go to events where you meet like other young moms at a park. That's so amazing. So there's that. There's also one thing that I just love to tell people about, and it's something called the liking gap. And I find that if you can prep yourself ahead of time, you're more likely to enjoy the social event. And when we understand the liking gap, it really helps us prep. So the liking gap is actually, and like I love to tell clients this because they'll be like, what if like people secretly hate me? And I'll be like, they don't. They like you more than they think, says science. So the liking gap is when we have a conversation with somebody like you and I right now, right? Like one of us might leave the conversation and be like, they thought I was okay, or they, maybe thought I was a little much. But in reality, people like us way more than they think they do. So they found this like people where, like, let's say there's person A and person B, and person A was thinking about person B's reaction to them.
Mhm.
And they would rate, like, oh, they probably liked me at, like, this is me making this part of it up, but this is basically what it said. They liked me at like a 3 out of 5. And then person B would be like, oh no, I really liked them at a 5 out of 5. And they found that consistently.
Interesting.
So yeah, it was, as you're going in and prepping yourself and appreciating yourself ahead of time before social events, that can help go a long way. And I like to say, like, remember the liking gap before you are going into these things. People are going to like you more than you think that they do. That can be really helpful to get started.
You know what? That is so true because we are much harder on ourselves than I think other people. And we all want to be accepted and we all want, like, I don't think you really walk into a room going, I like her, I don't like her, or I don't like her. Like, it just doesn't happen. Now, there are
Mhm.
some people where I think, what's the word I'm looking for? Physiologically, we mesh or we don't. Like, I remember this one girl that used to work for me, adorable. And she's not a girl, she was a woman. And she was just had so much to give and she was just such a sweet person, but no matter how much we tried to talk, like it just we couldn't mesh, and it was weird because we both wanted to, but there was this awkwardness. And so I think that sometimes, I mean, that's very, very rare. Usually it's just you want to be able to get along with anyone, and if they have an issue with you, it's usually because of their insecurities. It has
Right.
nothing to do with you. And I think that
Mhm.
that's probably the biggest thing that I had to learn because I used to, there's a family member where I would be sitting right next to her, literally. And I'd be like, hey, so da, 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 like literally right next to her. And she would just ignore me, like look straight ahead and completely ignore me. I'm like, this is unreal. And I realized again, I was like 40 pounds lighter and she was very heavy. And it was her own insecurities. And then when I got heavy, now she like these my BFF. And so
Mm.
I
Wow.
think that it's other people's insecurities that we have to remember, not ours.
Yes. And I think that's what happens so often. A lot of times, what I've noticed for my people
Mhm.
anyway, and my people tend to be around, like, I have clients from 14 to 62, but my clients most of the time are around like their mid 20s, mid 30s. One thing I've noticed, especially with them, is they tend to be social perfectionists as well. And so, what that really means is that they go into a social event and they're like, I got to say the right thing at the right time in the right way to get the response to know that I'm doing a good job and that I'm likable and charismatic. And this is why accepting and appreciating ourselves is so important, but also that's never going to happen. Like, nowadays, I think I'm a very charismatic person and I fumble all of the time. Like, I like to joke, like, Beyonce fumbles, like Taylor Swift fumbles. We're never going to get it right, like, quote unquote, get it right all the time and be socially perfect. And that alone is, I've noticed, like a really radical mindset shift for my people.
And I think we all fumble because we're all human and we're not
Right.
perfect. And we're used
Right.
to seeing like the Facebook perfection. But have you seen that picture where here's the picture, but let's zoom out, here's the real picture? And so,
Mhm.
I mean, that's what we have to remember is nobody's perfect. And so you just have to make sure that you remember that and keep telling yourself that.
Yes.
They're human just like me.
Right, right. And if you are somebody listening and you do feel like, right, you have social anxiety or you're like, still feels bad going out there and putting myself out there, I want to offer that there's this graphic. It was really popular a few years ago, and it was about these jars. And there was a smaller jar, a medium jar, and like a really big jar. And inside each of those jars were like the same size ball. And people were saying that, grief, when you lose the loss of somebody, like, never goes away, but you build a life around it. Like, around, like, towards the last jar that was so much bigger,
Mhm.
that rock in there, that circle, I forgot what I called it there. That rock, I don't know. But it looked so much smaller, even though it was the exact same size. The jar was so much bigger around it.
Mhm.
And all of us have some level. I mean, I shouldn't say all of us, not including certain like mental health,
Yeah.
but most of us
Mhm.
have some level of social anxiety and social consciousness, and we're wired that way, and that's never going away. And that's okay. We don't need it to. So I think a lot of times too, people will focus on those sensations of social anxiety or being socially aware, and then they'll be like, oh my gosh, like right? They just focus on them. They almost like build it up and amplify it. Accept it. You're right. Like the more you do this, the more you appreciate yourself, the more you connect with other people, it's easier to go to these things, and your jar will build around that feeling as well.
I love that. So how did you get into this?
So, I think my whole life, I, and I might not come off like it right now, but I think my whole life I identified as being someone that was shy.
Mhm.
And, based on like my own history with my own family and so on, I always felt like I had to earn
Right.
love
Right.
and earn appreciation. So I was always trying to like people please and make everyone around me like me. I was really like using other people as my mirrors, like their reaction to me determined my self-worth. And once I graduated, I graduated with a degree in psychology and sociology. And once I graduated, realized like so quickly, a lot of my friendships
Mhm.
started to change. And I was like, started to feel a little bit more confident in myself. I've been to therapy, but I was like, man, I do not want to spend the rest of my life like this.
Mhm.
And so, to be frank, like just for a personal benefit, I researched this like it was my job, having no idea that it would be my
Yeah.
job. Yeah, and I looked into it, like I mean, so much. I was actually earlier today, like I don't know, can't stop. Like I'm obsessed.
Right.
So like learning everything there is to learn about it. So doing that, I also hired a coach that did evidence-based like practices and stuff, and she really helped me grow my confidence.
Mhm.
But, and I really think like this is what changed my whole world. It was the magic sauce of me growing my confidence and then applying what I was learning about friendship and connection, like actively doing that for myself, that completely changed my self-image, the
Mhm.
way I connected myself, and honestly, it expanded my confidence in such a powerful, big way that I wasn't expecting. And we see that a lot in my master's now. And we see that a lot, like throughout different life stages. Like the most important thing every single time is like our relationship with ourselves, the way we think about ourselves, and the way we feel connected to other people. And
Mhm.
there was actually a Harvard study that came out, and it was the longest study on happiness. It was a 80-year study, and they found that the number one predictor for happiness was our quality of our connections. But anyways, I got into this by doing that myself, and then I created what I call like the friendships of my dreams, and then everybody kept asking me how I did it.
Huh.
So that is how I jumped in and got started. That's how we got here.
Okay, so to unpack that, I think that first of all, you had an issue that you were dealing with, right? And so
Mhm.
then you got into like, okay, how can I help myself? And then it became your passion project and your interest. And I think that as an entrepreneur, that's kind of how things get started in businesses, right? It might start as a hobby or it might start as something that you just start researching, then it morphs into this thing that it's like it's your purpose, and that's why. And so I think there are so many people, and that's why I was happy to have you on, that deal with this on a daily basis. You're not alone. And that's why when we first started talking before we came online, that I'm like, I totally resonate with you because I used to feel like that awkward person that have to please. And I was so miserable for so long, and my health was so horrible for so long because of that. And so when we are not our authentic self and we sit there and try to people please, that is the issue that we start to run into. And the number one thing I tell my kids all the time, besides don't lie to me, is and it goes along with that, is be your true self. I grew up very religious. I am very religious. And I've taught my kids to be that way. But, I have one that has chosen not to go that path right now. And that's his choice. And so what I say to him is you have to like, just don't sit on a fence. You have to just choose. And if you don't, like, don't try to please somebody, but you need to be authentic. If you know you're supposed to be doing this and you're doing this instead, that's not okay either, right? You have to be authentic and do what that you feel is right in yourself, whatever that may be. Now I say that with the asterisk because if you want to go rob a bank, that I'm not giving you permission to go rob a bank. But it's really trying to find out who you are so that you can then be happy with yourself so that then you can help other people. And that's what you've done is you found your peace and now you want to help other people find that same peace, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I totally agree with you. I think a lot of entrepreneurs have that story. And I will say too, one thing that, and this is just like a personal observation,
Mhm.
we, you know, for years and years and years, like before like our quote unquote like modern society, if you will, like when we were like when humans were in tribes,
Yeah.
it was really important to belong. It
Mhm.
was one of our number one reasons why we survived was belonging to a group, was working together and like to contribute to that group. Like,
Right.
and I think we see that with entrepreneurs, especially today, is I want to do this because I want to contribute in whatever way that might be, contribute to the society, to this group that I belong in. So I really think it's like part of our DNA. We're wired to connect this way. And a
Mhm.
huge part of that is being your authentic self. Like in
Yeah.
order to connect, you have to be seen in your authentic self.
And I think I cannot tell you how many people I've had on lately, and they've all hired coaches. And so, I mean, I cannot stress the importance of hiring a coach for so many reasons. But in addition to hiring a coach, you also need to have a group, a tribe, as you talked about. I know it's not politically correct to say anymore, but it really is a tribe. If you go back to hunting and gathering society, that was their tribe, and that's how they survived. If you animals. They're in this group, and we'll call them a tribe. It could be a pod, it could be whatever. But you have to be able to, as you said, contribute. You can't be a consumer all the time. You need to contribute. And I think that's one of my reasons for doing this podcast, because it clearly takes a ton of time. That
Mhm.
you're not making any money from it, but it's trying to make a difference in other people's lives that can help them get through the day, or it can get through maybe something they're struggling with in their industry or in their business or in their family. And so those are the things that for me, it's what have I learned and what can I contribute so that you don't have to go through it, or maybe you have an example of what you could or should not do.
Mhm.
So, I think that that's important. Getting back to your relationships and helping being the relationship coach, I think that there's also people that because we're pleasers and we tend to want to help other people, some people latch on to us and it can be destructive. Here's a good example. I have a daughter who has a friend who, she's 10 years old, and this friend's like, hey, can she come over and play with me or paint my room? And they live an hour away, first of all. Second of all, like I was been super sick in the ER far too many times this week. So I'm like, no, I'm not feeling well. And so she's like, well, you have to drive her down, and then I'm gonna have to wait for her to paint this room and then come back. And furthermore, it's on Sunday, which is our family day. And so I said to this girl, no, it's Sunday, it's family day, and I don't feel well. And so this girl writes back like, fine, I guess I'll do it myself. I only want to do it with my capital letters, best friend, and to me, I took that as manipulative. Right. And so then a couple of days later, she's on the phone with this girl talking, and then we're hearing this conversation because she's on speaker, and it was very manipulative. Nobody likes me. I don't have any friends. I don't da 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 da. I need you to da 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 da. And so we sat my little 10-year-old down and said, sweetie, this friend is not a friend. She is controlling, she's manipulative. And, so we can see it from the outside perspective. But now let's talk about ourselves. And we all have that person who has somebody like that. So, how do you know when a friendship is holding you back, and how do you release that?
Yeah,
I know that was a lot.
really. No, no, no. Really good question. Really great example. And I want to preface this by saying too, so research has found over and over again that female friendships, especially, we have deeper emotional bonds compared to like male to male friendships. However, female friendships are much more fragile. We're
Yeah.
much more likely to end a friendship compared to men.
Yeah.
And I think at some level there are strengths to that. However, we also know like it takes like about 200 hours to make like a best friend, like to make somebody, like to make like a really, really close bond. So what I want to offer to people is I'm going to say this next piece, but before I say that, I want to offer that like we can actually create deeper bonds through repair conversations and through connecting with people. And I'll give like a really quick example of that before I dive into it. So one of my best friends last summer reached out to me and she was like, "Hey, this is really like bothering me and I don't know how to like say this to you and like this I feel like you're not prioritizing our friendship." And the way she did it also was like she led with the connection. Like our relationship's important to me and like this is how I'm feeling. And when we lead with connection, we're so much more likely to create like a more connected conversation, connected bond. But it brought us so much closer because I was able to hear her out and like see her and her vulnerability and to be open and like share with her myself. And it created so much more trust. Like I feel 10 times more secure. Not that I didn't before, but 10 times more secure and deeper trust with this person since she quote unquote called me out, if you will, you know? So I do want to start by saying that. However, when we do have situations with friends where, you know, situations like that, that you just described with your daughter, like how do we recognize that and release that? I mean, there's no one size fits all, but right, of course, ever. But I find that if you have tried to have like repair conversations or to just even be like, what's going on with you? Because like you were saying, it's never really about us. It's always about our own selves and our own noggins, right? Like, so if somebody's thinking something about us, it's really not about us. So, like, oh, is something going on, right? Like, you need help with? Like,
Mhm.
I think those are really important things to do. However, at some point in time, like the example that you just gave, being upset and being like, I thought like you were my best friend and like no one likes me and like having someone basically put their responsibility of like their
Mhm.
feelings onto you, which we all do that a little bit,
Yeah.
but to have them do that in such a powerful way or a big way, I think we need to just really ask ourselves, like, what does this friendship feel like to
Mhm.
me? And feel like to me consistently, not just in this one moment, right? Where like that moment I just described in the summer with my best friend, she didn't feel that close with me at that point, but she talked to me about it. We got 10 times closer because of it. So, like, how do you feel in this like friendship consistently? Have you tried talking to them about it? And I think ultimately it boils down, like there's a framework that I have that I could find, but I think ultimately it boils down to, right, like trust yourself.
Beautiful moms, remember,
And
you are
women
unbreakable.
often,
Keep
we
illuminating the
try to be
world with your
nice.
strength,
We try to
pursuing
be
your
like the
dreams,
night, and
and
we gotta remember
reveling
that
in the
like
splendor of motherhood.
at
This
some
is
point
Charisse
it's
Walker, bidding
nicer
you farewell for
to
now.
end the
Stay
friendship
tuned
like
for
that
more empowering conversations on the
because it's
next
when we
episode
let it
of
keep
the
going
Unbreakable
that more and more
Mompreneurs
problems come
podcast.
about, and then we're
Until
more
then,
likely to get
keep
angry
shining
and upset
bright.
and so on.
Signing
So
off with love,
I hope that
Charisse
helps,
Walker.
like those like frame of mind, those questions, like how do I feel in this friendship consistently? Like your daughter, like being 10 years old. I'm not sure. I don't have a 10-year-old. I don't know. I don't have a lot of experience with 10-year-old. So, but like, how does she feel in that friendship consistently? Does she consistently feel guilty? Does she consistently feel, burdened? Has she tried talking about this with this person and there's no like comprehension there? Okay. Well, like, yeah, then it's time to move on because it ultimately, I really think we need to think about that as the nice way, the kind way, because truthfully too, what I have found for myself and even for some of my clients is that when we keep friendships like that, we're also not really helping that person grow either, right? Like, if it's, possible for them if they're able to, but it's also, we're more likely to show up in ways that are unkind by keeping that friendship
Mhm.
on on our radar like that. So
I call it a gimmick because I actually graduated in sociology as well. And I used to teach this class called group dynamics. And so my daughter, a couple years ago, when she was a senior in high school, and she had the same type of thing, this girl that constantly for attention would say these things. And I was so annoyed Because we go to their house, they're all standing out. It's 11 o'clock at night. Oh, I'm afraid she's going to hurt herself. What should we do? And so they're standing outside for like 30 minutes. I'm like, you guys, this is ridiculous. So I walk up to the door. You can't do that. You can't do that. I walk up to the door, I knock on it. I'm like, if she's going to hurt herself, let's deal with this, right? And let's tell her parents or let's talk about it. And it was this gimmick. And so I bring out the book, I read it, and I talk about how it's a game people play. It's, oh, I feel so fat, because they want to hear somebody say, you're not fat, or I feel so this, because they wanted that validation, reassurance. And so a lot of times they don't realize they're doing it, but at the same time they are. And it's not healthy for you to, as you talked about, validate. And so that's the part that we have to be careful, because sometimes it is a serious situation and you can't make light of it. But other times it's just a manipulation tactic that people use subconsciously or consciously that they are saying and doing. And I love that you talk about the repair option with your friend, where she is giving an opportunity to repair your relationship instead of just ignoring you or letting it go. And somebody like that, if they're going to come and talk to me about it, and a lot of times you're not aware, 100% I will give like, thank you so much. I had no idea. And you usually do get closer if it's received correctly.
Right, right. And a tip again that we can do for that this friend, I don't know whether or not she recognizes that she did this, but this is huge. If we lead the conversation with our intention of connection, we're so much more likely to get farther. And that's for like any kind of conversation. The way she led the conversation was she said, our friendship's really important to me,
Yeah.
and this is how I'm feeling.
Mhm.
And this is what's going on with me, right? Like our friendship's important to me. At the end of the day, what I want from this conversation is for us to be closer. Sometimes we get really caught up in our hurt and our anger and our resentment and like I always go all out for their birthday and they never go all out for mine, or I'm always the one initiating. We get really caught up in that, which, sometimes it might be to move on from from the friendship, but most of the time we still want to be friends with that person. We just want to feel seen and heard and connect with them in a deeper way, and that builds more trust. So we need to make sure we lead conversations with connection.
Love that. So what's your one piece of advice that you would give women who are struggling to feel like, maybe I'm going to throw a different wrench in it, where they don't feel like, because there's always a community in the business that you're in or the industry that you're in. And so in order to be able to be more impactful, a lot of times you need to be able to fit into that community. So what would be your advice for somebody that doesn't feel like they're on the outside of it? And how do they break into feeling like they can impact that community?
That's a really good question. And honestly, like I've done a lot of these. I've never been asked that in that type of way. Like, how can they go in and impact their community? I think, truthfully, most people want to be heard. And we go through life like wanting to feel heard, to feel understood, to be appreciated. And so, what I would offer to somebody going in, like maybe they're feeling on the outside and they want to connect more with those people, is to one, like, and it takes like bravery. I say, like, be proud of being the initiator. Like, we live in a world that craves connection so much because there aren't enough initiators out there. And so, when you are an initiator, like, you are literally like changing our cultures.
That's true.
Yeah, initiate with people. And I would say, like, find ways for both of you to be seen and heard in like a satisfying way. And you can do that, especially, I'm just imagining, but this isn't true for everybody. Like, if somebody feels like they're on the outside, they typically maybe are like feeling introverted. Use that for you. Introversion can actually be an advantage when it comes to deep and meaningful relationships, because introverts typically care about the depth of it, care about one-on-one conversation. They're really good at listening and going there and really deeply seeing people. So use that for you, right? Like, reach out to people in that community and build one-on-one ties with them. And when you go to community events, it's also so much easier for you to feel like you belong, because you go in and you can be like, oh my gosh, like I had this like one-on-one conversation with this person over here and then this person. That is really huge at feeling like you belong to an event, to a space anyway. So that would be like my top piece of advice.
I like that. And, instead of focusing on trying to make an impact on 20, like you talked about, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 people. That's great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, how do people find you if they want to get a hold of you?
Definitely. Connectionwithjewel.com. Jewel is spelled Jewel, like a rock or like the singer. So connectionwithjewel.com is where all of my information is. On there, we have like a freebie. So if you want to keep connecting with me and subscribe to my email list that I never email to, and that's one thing I'm going to get working on. But we do have in there how to belong at any event and how to make a friend at an event. And so there I really go into like the science and like make it actionable tips for going to an event and like making like a friend there, not just meeting somebody, but like making like a deep, meaningful friendship. Yeah, so come check that out. I'm also on Instagram. I started a brand new account, so come say hi to me. I'd appreciate that at Connection with Jewel. And yeah, I'd love to know what anybody's like favorite takeaways are. If they have any questions, like feel free to DM me. I'm always happy to answer.
I love that. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Unbreakable Mompreneurs, yet another podcast episode with Jewel. And if you are feeling alone, do not be. Just reach out to somebody and go on our website, get the information, because she spent a lot of time and effort and years researching this. And if, it's something that I've struggled with over the years. And once you find yourself and you become confident in your own skin, it is such a freeing experience and feeling, and you can actually accomplish so much more because of that. So have a fantastic day and go change your life if you need to. See you later. Beautiful moms, remember, you are unbreakable. Keep illuminating the world with your strength, pursuing your dreams, and reveling in the splendor of motherhood. This is Charisse Walker, bidding you farewell for now. Stay tuned for more empowering conversations on the next episode of the Unbreakable Mompreneurs podcast. Until then, keep shining bright. Signing off with love, Charisse Walker.